Hey everyone and welcome back. Okay, in the last tutorial we saw how we could use a for loop to iterate over an array of values, so that was good. We're starting to build on our knowledge of for loops because I don't just want to show you the syntax, i.e. the structure of how to write a for loop. I actually want to get you starting to think about how you can combine various pieces of code that we've learned to actually perform some sort of task. So in this tutorial, what I'd like us to do is I'd like to use a for loop to essentially log out to the console numbers 1 to 100 inclusive, so include the number 100. And after you've logged out a number, I want you to say whether it is an odd or an even number, okay? So how we're going to do this, I'll just tell you, and then I'll write the pseudocode, and then we'll write this out together, but see if you can do this yourself. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a for loop. We're going to initialize our counter variable. So we'll say let I equal to 1. We'll start counting at 1. We'll have some sort of condition. So we'll run the loop while I is less than or equal to 100. After each loop iteration, we want to increase our counter variable I. So we'll say I++. And then inside of our for loop, what we can do is, because we need to make a decision whether a number is odd or even, we can use an if statement. And we can combine the if statement with the modulus operator, which we've seen previously. So we know that an even number, let's say the number 10 mod 2 will divide unevenly, so there will be nothing left over, okay? Whereas if there is one left over, an odd number doesn't divide evenly into 2, there'll be one left over, so then we know it's an odd number, okay? So how we're going to do this, like I say, is basically create a for loop, create a loop that runs from 1 to 100, okay? Inside of the loop, what you want to do is you want to have an if statement. And inside of that if statement, you want to just log out to the console whether a number is odd or even, and you can do that using the modulus operator, okay? So that's what we're going to do in this tutorial. Feel free to pause the video and see if you can write this yourself. Otherwise, feel free to code along with me. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write our for loop. So we're going to say for, and what we want to do, we want to run from 1 to 100. So first of all, we have to initialize our counter variable. So we could say let counter equal 1, but we'll just use I. I will denote our counter variable. Forgive my pronunciation and accent. So we're going to say let I equal to 0. Let's increase that to 1. My apologies. Then what we're going to do is we're going to run the loop while some condition is true, while I is less than or equal to 100, because you want to include the number 100, okay? If you were to say I is less than 100, it'll only run to number 99, assuming you increment the I operator, the I variable, I should have said it's a variable, and you do that using ++. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say I++, okay? So I is a variable. Curly braces, okay. So what we've done now is we've created a for loop, and it's going to run from the number 1, let I equal 1. It's going to run while I is less than or equal to 100. And after each loop iteration, every time you run the loop or cycle through the loop, what we're going to do is we're just going to add 1 to our counter variable. So in here, what we can do is we can have our if statement. So I'm just going to say if, and remember, I is our counter variable, okay? So I'm going to say, well, essentially, I mod 2. So remember, if you're on, let's say, the number 2, right, let's say the counter variable was I equal 2, 2 mod 2 would divide in evenly, okay? So therefore, there'd be nothing left over. And that'll be the same for every even number. So we know that any number that divides in evenly to 2 will have a remainder of 0, okay? And that's because 2 divides in evenly to 2, there's nothing left over. 4 divides in evenly to 2, there's nothing left over. 6 divides in evenly to 2, there's nothing left over. So every even number, when you use the mod operator, I mod 2 will have nothing left over. So we know that will be an even number. So what we can do is just log out to the console.log, the value of I, and then we'll say is an even number, semicolon to end the statement. You can put a space there as well. And therefore we know if that condition doesn't evaluate to true, so whatever counter we're on, mod 2, if this condition doesn't evaluate to true, we know we must then be iterating over an odd number rather than an even number. So then we can just say else console.log I is an odd number. I is an odd number, and semicolon to end the statement, and you can just put a little space there. And yeah, I'm happy with the code. You can delete that line of space if you want. Okay, so let's save and refresh. Should this work? Let me just double check. We've created a for loop. We're saying let I equal 0. So we're starting our counter variable I at 1. Sorry, 1, not 0. Force a habit. Then we're going to run while I is less than or equal to 100. I++, we're iterating 1 to the counter each time we go through the loop. So the first time we enter the loop, I is a value of 1. We're going to say, okay, 1 mod 2. Well, 1 does not divide evenly into 2. That will evaluate to false. So the first time we run the loop, we're going to log out to the console. 1 is an odd number. We come up here, increment the I counter variable. So now I is a value of 2. So then we enter the loop again. 2 mod 2 is strictly equal to 0. That will evaluate to true because 2 mod 2 divides in evenly. There's nothing left over. So then we log out to the console. 2 is an even number. Okay. And then what happens is we add to the counter variable again, etc., etc. So if I just save and refresh, let me just see, we get 1 is an odd number, 2 is an even number, 3 is an odd number, 4 is an even number, all the way down to 100. 100 is an even number. Okay, awesome. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. In this tutorial, we used the for loop to actually log out numbers 1 to 100, and we did an if statement inside of the for loop to check to see if a number was odd or even using the modulus operator. So one of the key things you're starting to learn now about JavaScript is you can actually use different pieces of code together. You can use a for loop to iterate over an array of values. You can nest an if statement inside of a for loop. Okay, so there's quite a lot we can do. So see you in the next tutorial where we will continue our learning journey together.